Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Nathan Walker, and today I'm going to talk to you about some cross-sector sustainability benchmarking and showing off a new comparison framework. Just before we get into it though, I've got to tell you about my project SDEWES, which is a collaboration between Bangor University in North Wales and Trinity College Dublin in Ireland. SDEWES means water, so Dua in Welsh is water and Ishka is Irish Gaelic for water as well. But now let's get into it, and first of all, I want to question why we should even bother trying to benchmark across sectors. Well, first and foremost, we can identify leaders in other sectors to begin the process of learning from them, instigating improvements in their company. Following on from that, we can generate partnerships and share expertise, and it's quite possible that by transcending sector boundaries and possibly common practice dogma, there may be opportunity to learn something that could not have been garnered from peers within the sector. And then collectively, these ensure that we could push the efficiency and productivity of operations for a company a step further. So that's why it would be good if we could do some effective cross-sector benchmarking. So what's stopping us? What are the problems? Well, the puzzle can be summarized in 4 points. First of all, we have different services provided by the different sectors. They have different market conditions. Most of the time, they also come in different sizes. Then lastly, we have mismatching metrics, which makes it very difficult to compare companies across sectors. So in the following few slides, I'm going to show you how we overcome many of these obstacles. But first, let me show you the sample that we were working with. We worked with data from 3 different sectors, those being the water and sewage sector, the energy, and the communications sector. For water and sewage, we had 9 companies, which spanned 6 years, and we used 8 indicators for that sector. For the energy sector, we had 5 companies over 7 years, with 6 indicators, and then lastly, with communication, we had just the 4 companies over 4 years with 7 indicators. And the indicators used for each sector tried to cover all aspects of sustainability, those being the service or social aspects, followed by the environment and the economic side as well. And just before I show you a little summary table of all the data we collected, I just want to emphasize the importance of indicator selection. Obviously, the metrics we choose to do the analysis with is going to heavily influence results. And even when we've captured all the data that we think we need, it can lead to some misleading results. And I want to give you an example just here. Say if we want to identify a person or a group of individuals, we need a certain set of metrics or indicators to try and find them. So for our person or people, we want to say that they're a male. So straight away, that cuts off about half the population. Great, good start. Then on top of that, we want to narrow it down further by their age. And we could go for age groups with this, but we're going to be very specific to make sure we get the exact type of person that we want. So we're going to say they were born in 1948. On top of that, to find our person, we want to find people that are also born in England, and in fact spend most of their time in London. We want to find someone that's remarried, so they've been married twice. We also want them to be a millionaire, and on top of that, famous. And we also want that fame and money to be from self-employed means. We also want them to have children, enjoy fine wines, enjoy international travel, as well as sports cars, and like stocks. So we've used 13 indicators here, and I think you'll agree we've really narrowed down out of the whole population who we're aiming for. It's a very specific type of person. And yet, when we look at the kind of people that we have targeted, they can be quite different. I'm sure you'll agree that King Charles and Ozzy Osbourne are indeed quite different. And this is actually what happens, by the way. Advertising firms using data to target their adverts to specific users get this same result. And I don't know about you, but you'd probably agree that showing these 2 people the same advert wouldn't be ideal for you trying to sell something. Which is why some other companies, such as Pixani, have expanded the range of data they use for adverts, going into things such as photos, location, and mobile data. And as researchers, we can do the same. But the expansion of metrics and data isn't always necessary as long as the indicators match our goals. Don't just collect as much data as possible and hope to meet your objectives. Okay, so with that in mind, let's take a look at the summary statistics we used to compare companies across sectors. Now, there does seem to be a lot here, but a lot of them are kind of overlapping and try and represent the same thing in each sector. So direct metrics still weren't compared across companies across sectors, but they were within sectors, and it'll become clearer in just a moment. So I want to highlight the service indicators that we used. These were largely around customer satisfaction, which each sector measures slightly differently. Some of them are from pure quantitative means, such as complaints per 100,000 customers, and minutes of interruptions per properties served. And some of the data is informed by customer surveys. Then we have more environmental indicators, and this is largely influenced by renewable energy production and carbon intensity emissions. Then at the bottom here, we've also got the economic indicators, and these range from things like credit rating to the return on regulated equity. So now I'm going to show you how exactly we use these metrics and indicators and data to actually compare companies across sectors. So firstly, it was by developing a scoring system. Companies received a score for each indicator based on their performance relative to peers in their sector. And just for clarification, I'll show you how a dummy indicator would be scored just here. So this dummy indicator could be anything. Let's say it's customer satisfaction for now, and we'll imagine it's just for the water sector. So here we have the full sample minimum and maximum range of data, and then we take that range and divide it by 5. And by doing that, we have the interval between each score. So for example, if a company got a rating of 83.08 for customer satisfaction, they would get a company score of 4 for that indicator. And then once we had a score for each indicator for each company, the scores were averaged within each group. So for all the service indicators, they were averaged, and the same for economic and environmental indicators. And then the generated scores for each sector can then be compared cross-sector. And we'll show you what this looks like now. So you can see here how the different companies performed in each sector for the different themed metrics, so the economic indicators, environment, and service indicators. Some companies are very mismatched in their performance. For example, TalkTalk right at the top here, which is a communications company in the UK, had very good environmental performance compared to their peers, with an average rating of 5, but actually performed very poorly with an average rating of 1 for their economic and service performance. And then when we look at the total scores, so the summed scores from the different themed groups, so the social, environmental, and economic scores, we can start to see the higher and lower performers. And the company with the largest score here is Sky, who significantly outperforms the rest of the communications sector. So comparatively to all the companies in the sample, even in the other sectors, they are the most dominating company. And then in the other sectors, we see that British Gas and SSE perform the best compared to the rest of their sector. And then we have Wessex and Severn Trent performing the best in the water sector. So in theory, the higher performing companies could look at other higher performing companies from other sectors to begin the process of learning from best practice. So there will likely be fewer opportunities at the micro process level of benchmarking. For example, Welsh Water probably wouldn't learn much about running its water network from, say, BT over in the communications sector. But there could be other opportunities, perhaps managerial or customer service based. But to make this a little clearer, I did some cluster analysis and did some company grouping. So by using k-means clustering, we had 2 distinct clusters. So the higher performing companies and the lower performing companies. We have a cluster of 7, which are the sector leaders, followed by a cluster of 11, which are the lower performers. So what are the conclusions we can take from this information? Well, with the benchmarking done here, companies can compare themselves against other companies in the same sector. For example, Sky had the highest overall score of 13.5, significantly outperforming the communications sector, as we've mentioned. So the rest of the communications sector could absolutely learn from them. And then the same goes for British Gas and SSE in the energy sector, and Wessex, Severn Trent, and United Utilities in the water and sewerage sector. And then on top of that, companies can also compare cross-sector. Top performers such as Sky, SSE, and Wessex can assess top performers in other sectors to continue improving rather than being limited within their own sectors. And then lower companies can look within and across sectors to identify best practices to improve their performance. And then to finish off, I just briefly want to cover a little methodology review and some future developments which could improve the process. So we did indeed create a process which allows cross-sector comparisons through regenerated performance values. But it is highly dependent on the chosen indicators and the data availability, as we saw with our friends Ozzy Osbourne and King Charles. Then we also have a question in the future about the weighting of indicators. For example, are some economic indicators more important than service indicators? And if they are, we should attach that value into the scoring process. And continuing on indicator selection, perhaps we should consult stakeholders in the future to select the indicators and indeed weight them as well. But then we have another question. Well, which stakeholders should we involve? Perhaps we could ask some stakeholders which stakeholders should be involved to help us select our indicators. But what about those stakeholders? Who should select them? Don't worry, I'm going to stop there, and I just want to say thank you before I go, and if you want to connect with me on any platform, you absolutely can do so. Here are some links to my email, LinkedIn, ResearchGate, and my Twitter. If you have any questions, absolutely contact me through any of those means. But for now, thank you for getting to the end. I hope you learned something or at least found it interesting, and goodbye for now.